But I suppose here's the thing, though, is that if we had, we had the Council of Nicaea, say that, and the Council of Constantinople as well.
Mm-hmm.
If, let's say, Abraham, David, Job, Daniel, and Solomon were sitting on the table, do you think they'd agree with what people were saying, or would they say, this is all a bit too fanciful for us?
Well, Jesus said Abraham looked to see his day. Yeah, and did see it, which is why I go back to actually chapter 18 of Genesis. But that's speculative. Abraham saw Jesus' day, so if he was there in Nicaea, I'm sure he'd agree with exactly what the Council of Nicaea, those Catholic bishops, were determining, because Abraham would acknowledge he didn't have that language as the first of the Hebrews. He was dealing with a language which had none of the valuable expansiveness and explanatory power of Greek. But once you've got that, you can say things about God which could not have occurred to Abraham, because language, if it's very limited, your ability to think about things is limited by that language, and because you can't express your thoughts so well. But Greek allows a much wider expression of thoughts. And so Abraham would say, okay, now I see that language. He'd have supernatural understanding of ancient Greek, and he would then say, this is correct.
Yeah, but I think what I think would actually happen is that because they're all practical people,
yes,
they would just say, what are you guys wasting time with all this stuff for? We already have the information from the prophets and the priests, so all this extra stuff isn't necessary. That's why I think they'd more see in what is going on.
So if Abraham was, or David or Solomon were at the Council of Nicaea, and say they weren't discussing the specific issues of Nicaea, say they were just reading St. John's Gospel, what would Abraham and David and Solomon think of that? Because that's in Greek, and that's using logos terminology, and that's you got Philo of Alexandria who's using that. So this is really kind of the influence of the Greek invasion, Greek conquest, isn't it?
Yeah, no, but I think what they do is the similar thing that I do as well is they would just fix it so that, because they know John's an Israelite, that you're not supposed to use the Greek to try and add anything to what John's saying. Anything John says is in compliance with what's in the law and the prophets. So they would stick to that line, and that any interpretation which brings it outside of the law and prophets, they disagree with.
Now, did you say this is because John is a Hebrew?
Yeah.
But surely his, race doesn't matter. What John is doing is he's saying, as everybody knows, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Yeah.
Now this would strike Abraham's ears or David's ears as odd, not said in their day. So you've got a person a long, long time after they'd lived, 1800 years after Abraham had lived, 1500 years after Moses, 1,000 years after David. John is saying these things in this odd way. And I think if these ancient individuals from the Old Testament would say that's okay, given that it is a development of language and development of ideas, there'd be no reason why they would not say okay to further development, provided it was legitimate.